我哋咧啱啱就夠鐘開會，咁
Is the appointed time and is the quorum. I call the meeting to order. Let's invite the administration to join us. You all have the agenda with you. Item number 1 is confirmation of minutes of meeting. Is the minutes of meeting of the meeting held on the 18th of September 2015, paper number 3 bracket 148/15 to 16. So far, the Secretariat has not received any proposals for amendment. Minutes confirmed? Okay. We have with us from the government, Assistant Director of Environmental Protection, Mr. Samson Lai, Principal Environmental Protection Officer of the Environmental Protection Department, Dr. Alan Lam, Deputy Law Draftsman, Department of Justice, Mr. Gilbert Mo, and Senior Government Counsel from the Department of Justice, Ms. Elaine Ng. We are here to deal with the matters arising from the meeting on the 18th of September 2015 and consideration of a CSA by the administration. We've already finished with the clause by clause. Members have raised some issues on the meeting on the 19th of September. The government has responded to them and has also prepared the CSAs for us. They are CB bracket 150/15 to 16 bracket 02. I will first ask the government to take us through the paper. And then I'll give the floor for members and the legal advisor to ask questions. Mr. Lai? On the 18th of September, we have completed the clause by clause. We're asked to consider 2 drafting issues, and we have, as we've set out in paragraphs 2 and 3, we have taken on board the views of the Bills Committee, and I will go into details when I take you through the paper. The third part is that we charge a recycling fee under the producer responsibility scheme, and the charge and the fees should be in the form of a levy. So we will propose a CSA to change the word from fee, recycling fee, to recycling levy. The Bills Committee would like us to set out in paper the principle for setting the recycling levy. So you will find the explanation in paragraph 4. We adopt the principle of producer polluter pays. So we will recover the full cost of the producer responsibility scheme. The government will follow the established procedure. They are in discussion with the FSDB for the level of the levy. Once it's decided, we will go to the Environmental Advisory Council and promulgate the levy by way of a subsidiary legislation, that is, an amendment to the schedule. And I will go through perhaps we will pause here.
So in the bill, we've gone through several rounds of meeting, and these are the CSAs that we will be moving. In Annex A of the document, we have attached the entire bill with the proposed amendments being marked up. So I'd like to suggest that we can, go scrutinize all these proposed amendments, and when we come to clauses where there are amendments, I'll explain them. The first amendment is in respect of Clause 2. We propose to add Clause 2A, that is to amend Section 2 of the PERO, so that we can provide for the charging of a recycling fee. One of the amendments regarding producer responsibility includes the charging of a recycling levy, so that we can take proper care or properly dispose of certain products. We are now proposing to make this amendment so that so that we can charge the recycling levy, so that when we charge the fee to the producer, the fee should be charged in the form of a recycling levy. So I'd like members to note that in the English version, they've added in the amendment levy or. During the clause-by-clause scrutiny of the bill, I think with the Bills Committee suggested that we should change the term fee to levy. So any comments from members regarding regarding 2A? No. Next, we come to Clause 8, and Part 4 is added to the Product Responsibility Ordinance, and several. In 31, Clause 31, we are proposing to ban some of the interpretation. The first one is distribute, and we are proposing to make 3 amendments. And then in A, we've reviewed the clause, and we believe that the word lease in English should be replaced by hire or hire purchase. I think that will be a more proper form of drafting. In Chinese, this is 出租 or 租購. So this is simply to improve on the terminologies. And again, there is a consequential amendment to subsection C, where the meaning is the same. The second amendment is to delete 31 bracket D. Originally means distribute means giving the equipment to another person as a prize or gift. So we have a definition for the word use, and we propose that we merge the 2 clauses. And if someone were to give the electric equipment to another person, it is regarded as a use, and hence D is merged with the definition of use in B. So okay, we can streamline the whole clause. The third amendment is the last one, but does not include a person who only provides service for transporting the equipment that does not belong to the person for another person. The Bills Committee had already had a very thorough discussion on this, and some members have discovered that in some provisions the word distribute is used. In some other provisions, it said further distribution in Hong Kong. So in some of the clauses, it mentioned Hong Kong. In others, Hong Kong is not mentioned, and they were worried about the confusion. And we've explained to the Bills Committee that we've now amended the drafting. The policy intention is the same. When these electric equipment are exported out of Hong Kong, then they will not come under the ambit of the Producer Responsibility Ordinance, and therefore having adding the word distribute, we can resolve that anomaly. And so that's the amendment to the interpretation of the word distribute. Perhaps we can pause here and have a discussion. I think there are two major amendments here. First of all, by way of sale, by hire or hire purchase. Well, this is not provided for in the originally in the bill, and I think we may need to spend some time to consider this. Regarding as for the sale of electrical equipment by hire or hire purchase, I mean both. While it's not very common, but it still exists. So personally, I think we should also consider this sort of scenario. But do we need to further clarify the wording here? So I'd like to listen to the members and also our legal advisor. Regarding the definition of use, right now the definition is very broad. And, giving the equipment to another person as a price and so on. For example, in electrical function, we give away some electric equipment as for lottery draw. Would that also fall under the ambit of this provision? Let me first of all deal with the interpretation. The government now has added hire purchase or hire. So members may want to consider whether they want the administration to explain what they mean by hire or hire purchase, or would it suffice that we take the dictionary meaning of those two terms? And also regarding the term distribute, the government has deleted subsection D, and I'm looking at the English version. Subsection D is deleted. Originally, subsection D is give the equipment to another person or as a price, and is confined to a business purpose. After deleting D, the administration has incorporated this under the definition of use. But the definition of use in B is said otherwise than for business purpose, and the scope is expanded to cover whether or not it is for a business purpose. So simply put, so the scope of regulation is now broader, and also I'd like to ask whether members can go to the next paragraph, and that is in clause 32, and
registered under section 3, the supplier carries on a business of distributing regulated electrical equipment. 咁而家政府當局提出嘅修訂呢，就係查咗嗰個 carries on a business of distribute.
Government has deleted carries on a business of distribute. They put the distributes or uses into clause 32. So the scope regulation is now broader. Previously, it only covers distribution. Now it includes both distribution and uses. After the amendment, whether or not it is for a business purpose. So what I'm worried about is that if you have a supplier who is not a registered supplier, but he has a regulated electric equipment that he would like to donate to a charitable organization, then in this case, so whether or not it is for a business purpose, it gives away that equipment, it would already be construed as use, in which case would he be in breach of clause 32?
Well, this echoes the concern I have expressed. that is for private purpose, not for business purpose. A prize is donated as gift. Mr. Lai, shall we hear from you? In relation to 32, section 32, you will have to read it together with the definition of supplier, because only a supplier can contravene section 32 bracket 1. If you look at section 31, that is A, it means that it's manufacture the electrical goods, or for distribution purpose import the electrical equipment. So can a company import electrical equipment from an overseas country? The company itself may not be engaged in the business of selling electrical equipment, but they want to purchase regulated electrical equipment. So that can they import directly from overseas for their own use? We've looked into it. If it's for use in Hong Kong for business purpose, then a levy has to be paid. And in the original provision of 32 bracket 1, they are not caught. So we introduce a consequential amendment to effect that. There is a marked difference from the original amendment. Under 31, use, you see that is exhibit the equipment for business purpose, and B, give the equipment to another person as a prize or gift, otherwise than for business purpose. And if it's for business purpose, then is D under distribution, the original, that is, give the equipment to another person as a prize or gift for business purposes. In our discussion, we have already accepted the wording. So why is there such a need? Because we have already accepted for distributing for business purpose and use for non-business purpose. Why do you still propose another change? Let's hear from Mr. Andrew Leung first. If I go to an overseas country and purchase a computer, do I have to pay the levy? I buy it myself. And what if I order online? And I order a computer from a website that bears the logo of a fruit, and the goods is sent from Singapore to me, but I place the order on the fruit company Hong Kong site. So, well, the computer is sent from Singapore. I won't know, and without knowing, I would have contravened section 32. And it may happen at the airport. Is that your intention? Is it that in both scenarios there is a contravention of section 32? This does not regulate an individual's purchasing of regulated electrical equipment to and from Hong Kong, because it's not for business purpose. So you don't have to worry. On one occasion, during the discussion of the Bills Committee, members talked about a company choosing to order electrical appliances or computers from an overseas country, not for redistribution, but for use in the course of business. That's exactly my second scenario. I or my company place an order of a particular equipment through a Hong Kong website. So how is it different from me as an individual making the purchase online vis-a-vis making the purchase in the capacity of my company? You don't know. You won't know. And it's quite lax. So it's down to the enforcement officer to say whether I have broken the law. Well, whether it is done online or not is not material, so we don't have to have a separate discussion. In the case of a company, as far as we know, most of the time when a company purchases a computer, it will be done through a dealer. And under the bills, there should be registration and the levy paid. And if I buy in bulk, I can choose not to use a Hong Kong dealer. I can purchase directly from an overseas country. And I don't do it for redistribution because I don't sell the regulated equipment. So does it mean that I can circumvent the payment of levy? It's quite rare, we reckon. Well, for the original of Section 31 regulates only distribution. So if a company uses the equipment in its own office, then they are not under the scope of the regulatory regime. And we saw that as a loophole. That's why we propose this amendment to plug the loophole. And of course, if it's for its own use, then they can make a registration under 32(1) and follow the procedure, say payment of levy. It may be troublesome to them, and they can choose to go through a recognized importer, an intermediary. Then they don't have to deal with the procedure under 32(1). I do think that we also have to think about it. Say, for example, if it's parallel goods brought over from Shenzhen by an individual, then no levy is to be paid. This bill also regulates parallel goods. If it's a small amount, then that is brought over by an individual. If it's resold in Hong Kong, then it is regulated under the bill. If it's, say, a student studying overseas, the student buy a computer, bringing it back to Hong Kong, then it's not. So we don't intend to regulate individual consumers bringing electrical equipment to Hong Kong. Mr. Lai, please explain further. Because it's a material change. It's quite a big change. Originally, you have clearly defined what is use and what is distribute. Section 32 is clear. It's about distribution. Prohibition of carrying on business of distributing regulated electrical equipment without registration. You have left the heading unchanged under 32, but you have added the word use, and it has complicated the issue. Is that the case that you're just worried that a company may purchase regulated electrical equipment as a gift? you concerned that they can circumvent it, but this way is an important change. And we will have to spend some time to consider it, because for me it's a change in principle. I confirm your interpretation. Yes, we've had a discussion. Sometimes the company does not engage in supply business. Under the current framework, they can have a batch of computers for their own use, or give away as gifts, and they are not caught. Then they don't have to pay the levy, and we think that we can tighten it. Mr. Wong Ting Kwong, I want to follow up on what Mr. Andrew Leung said. It's not as easy or simple as the government paints it. So Mr. Leung finished his studies overseas, and he brings with him the latest model of an electrical appliance, and I really like it. And he's my friend. I ask him to sell it on to me. It's not a gift. I ask him to sell it on to me. So does it constitute distribution? Mr. Lai, the way you've written it is quite wide. So it seems that it will be down to the officer to decide whether to charge you. Then we have to go back to the definition of supplier. Under A is manufacturing, and the second part is import into Hong Kong and is in the course of business. So if the person who brings it back does not engage in any business, then it doesn't fall under the definition of a supplier. Well, then there is a problem, because in a way you are encouraging parallel goods traders. Because I'm only trading in parallel goods, so it's not a proper business. Well, under B of a supplier is carries on the business of distributing regulated electrical equipment to consumers. A person who manufactures regulated electrical equipment in Hong Kong in the course of the person's business, or a person who imports it. So what if it's not for my own use? I purchase a batch of computers, say for example from a fruit company, from a brand of a fruit online, and I give the same to my staff as gifts. And no registration has been made. So under Section 32, the company has broken the law and it is subject to a level 6 penalty. You have now included use as well. So that's why to me is a major change. Previously, you have distinguished for us the difference between distribution and use, and now it seems that you have lumped them together. First, about parallel goods. If a batch of goods is brought to Hong Kong for resale, then bringing the batch of goods to Hong Kong is in the course of the person's business, then it will fall under distribute. I mean, it's brought into Hong Kong by the company and not distributed further. Then it's back to the point raised by the chairman, whether the scope of use has been expanded. If a company imports electrical equipment to Hong Kong without further distributing it, because it's for the use of the company, what will happen? Under the original provision, since there is no further distribution, levy is not to be paid.
我就咁。
Well, I really don't understand. You're saying that this will deal with that scenario, and this is exactly what I'm worried about. For these acts which should be defined as use and not distribute, you've incorporated them here as well. In 32(1), you've added or uses, and so I think you're now also including it. Chairman, if I were a distributor, I think if I try to evade taxes, it's fair that I'll be sentenced of a fine of level 6. But for a company to buy computers for the use of its employees, and most of them are not aware of the requirements of this bill, and when the equipment arrives, and then they are sentenced to a fine of level 6 fine. Of course, you say the court will impose the penalty depending on the circumstances. But still, we're talking about someone who systematically breaches the law and someone who inadvertently has breached the law. Let's first listen to our legal advisor. Chairman, I think members might be aware, and also in the paper, members have noticed that in B, the definition of supplier includes a condition. That is, in the course of its business, distributing or using. The government has now deleted in the course of business. And the government has had added the latter part to B, and someone who distributes that equipment into Hong Kong, it does not include the provision of service. And we look at 32 in Chinese. If a supplier commits an offense if not being registered under Section 33, the supplier, carries on a business of distributing or the electric equipment. If I am not a supplier, I have originally intended to distribute these equipments but not able to sell them. I have some surplus stock. I want to donate them to a charitable organization. In this scenario, I would become a supplier. I would have brought these equipments into Hong Kong from abroad, and the outcome is that I'm not able to sell all these equipments. My original intention is to import them into Hong Kong to distribute them in Hong Kong. But for the unsold units, if I sell them to a charitable organization, it will be defined as use. My intention is that I want to help needy people so that they could have a better computer to use. Well, for a simple act like that, that is the fact that I'm not a registered supplier, I'm only a supplier. These equipments have been imported, and I donate them to an organization. Would I be in breach of the law? Well, if I understand the legal advisor correctly, the case he described is about a supplier who is in the electrical business. He has imported a batch of equipment. He's involved in distributing activities. Let's say out of 100 pieces, 10 could not be sold, and he donate them to an organization. And under according to the amendment, how should we understand what his liability should be? Now, first of all, he is a distributor, a supplier of electric equipment. According to the bill, he would need to be registered for him to distribute the first 90 equipment. then he would need to have submitted reports regarding those 90 units which have been sold. For the 10 unsold units, if we donate them, then in his report, he would need to say that 10 have been used and he would need to pay the levy. So the effect is that for these electric equipment imported in Hong Kong, I think he would have to pay the levy for the protection of the environment. What happens if I have only imported 10 units which I want to donate? And going back to the question raised by the chairman, because of the amendment to subsection B, that is the distribution or the uses of bringing the equipment for distribution use. I'm talking about these 10 equipments which are subject to regulation, and if we donate them to someone else, would he be in breach of Section 32 and be fined? Let me further explain my question because I don't think Mr. Lai has answered that question. According to your definition of supply, you say A or B. B, you have another or for distribution. Obviously, this would be someone who is in the electrical business, but you use the word or uses. So he is not a manufacturer or a distributor, but he uses the electric equipment in the course of business. I'm not a distributor or manufacturer, but the company employee needs to operate with the help of computers, and as a user, I import these computers for the use of my staff, and I don't charge them for it, and you can regard it as a gift. In this case, I will fall under the definition of supplier. So have you expanded the definition of supplier drastically? Yeah. Well, that's my literal interpretation. Chairman, when we scrutinize the bill, I think the scenario described is rather rare. Normally, we were talking about arrangements regarding it's rare. Well, the fact that it is rare doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. That's right. In our earlier discussion, when we come to a scenario like this, when someone buys the equipment, brings them into Hong Kong for his own use, of course you can only be in the electrical business before you can import the product. If it is for self-use, he doesn't need to pay a levy. We think this is a loophole because the company can buy a large batch of these equipments. Our policy intent is that we don't regulate the individual or consumers to bringing these equipments into Hong Kong. But if a company import a whole batch of such equipments into Hong Kong, then in the original bill, this is an area where we believe we need to tighten. And that's why we've added the word use. If the company bypass the distributor, buys the computers itself and use it in the course of its business, then according to the amendment, then like other suppliers of electric equipment, he will need to be registered and submit a report. Well, I'm worried that you may even include individuals in your definition, because it's very convenient for people to shop online. Now, if an individual does that, he uses a regulated electric equipment, say in my ward office, let's say, if I discover there's a computer online, something like an iPad, which is very good, I want to bring them into Hong Kong for the benefit of my staff. So I may need to buy 2 or 3. Would that be importing the equipment, for the purpose of our business, even for an individual. I mean, sometimes individuals may make purchases, in the name of the company. So we, in our early discussion on the difference between distribution and use, apparently you have gone the other way around. I think for online shopping, no, Mr. Lai, why don't you stick to the original clause? Why do you need to add distribution to 32? Perhaps you can polish the interpretation of distribution to allay your concern, rather than putting uses into clause 32 when it was originally not included. Chairman, I've already explained that why the rationale for our amendment. That is a company which is not in the electrical businesses, it buys these equipments for its own use, and we've seen that this is not a very common phenomenon. We will try to assess whether this is a loophole that deserves us moving this amendment and causing so much concern. Well, at least it has, caused a lot of concern today at this meeting. Well, the chairman asked further, why are we moving this amendment? I think perhaps you can go back and consider this further and see whether or not it's appropriate. Having heard our legal advisor and fellow members, and I, as I said, we have spent a lot of time explaining the difference between distribution and use, and that we don't need to worry as far as users are concerned. We will not, breach the law inadvertently. Apparently, you're now going backwards. You're now confusing the definition, and you've included the word use to clause section 32. You've even confused the definition of supplier. Originally, if I were an individual, I'm not a distributor. I'm not. In B, it's very clear. In the course of business, distribute the regulated electric equipment and bring them into Hong Kong. Obviously, this could only be the person in the business of electrical equipment. But for users, it's all right, right? That was what it used to be. So you say that we've not discussed this before, but that's not true. We have, discussed this before, and you had patiently explained to us what is meant by distribution. So I think this is something that really worries me. You are now creating another confusion over the term, distribution and even the definition of supplier. Mr. Andrew Lam. Those of us who are factory operators, very often we need to buy many machines. Sometimes we will buy 1 or 2 machines. They are delivered to our factory, and they will set them up. And suddenly, let's say an EPD officer come and said, find out that I bought this machine. Sometimes you can differentiate between machines or computers. There are many things that you need to handle carefully. We're not just talking about an ordinary computer. You have to cater to the needs of the many of the different industries. Even for the container terminal, if you buy any machine, the machine will come with 1 or 2 computers, and they're not simple computers. They could be custom made, for the whole system. We've discussed the definition of supplier. I think we have equally a concern regarding the English version. The definition of supplier in B, you said
regulated electrical equipment into Hong Kong in the course of the person's business for distribution or use. 跟住就 but does not include 後邊嗰句就係為嗰啲即係話速遞啊。
So what follows? I think we earlier on a discussion about the couriers and so on. So I expressed my concern over the Chinese text, but I think the English version, in the English version, I think our concern is even more obvious. In the course of business, that could cover myself as a leisure counselor. I could buy an iPad online and will be caught.
If you use a courier service, then you won't be caught. Oh, please, you will have to look into it again. Let's go on. Next is definition of consumer. We just fine-tune it. The meaning itself has not changed. We just changed the word selling to distribution. And, well, there is also a change in provision. It is taken from 35 bracket 5 in relation to tenant. And about the recycling levy, I've explained the difference. A definition of seller, and we've added, but does not include. So where a courier is involved, then the one who transport the goods, the company, is not defined as a seller. That is in relation to the definitions. Any questions? Well, we have covered changes in consumer, tenant, and seller, and also levy. No comments? Let's continue. 32 bracket 1, we've already discussed that. We will look into it. 33 is just a simple amendment. The director, when dealing with applications of registration by a supplier, is a difference between the word may and must. And we do think that using the word must is better than may, because the director will consider A and B when considering registration, no others. Section 34, and it's also to change from may to must. So that the factors for consideration will be clearer. And there's also a deletion. No longer carries on the business mentioned in section 32 bracket 1. We've simplified it to is no longer a supplier. 33 and 34, legal advisor. My first question, well, it's just for clarification. Well, previously it was an empowering provision, and now is a duty imposed by because you changed the word to must. As you know, in Cap 360, Cap 603, that is the principal legislation, well, it's different. So when it comes to processing registration or revocation, I just wonder whether the situation has changed. Well, when it's changed from may to must, we want to reflect the fact that the director exercised the discretion that is smaller. And we will consider what you said at the next stage. Please continue, legal advisor. In the principal legislation, it says that for applicable issues,
appeal may be made under this section. 咁因為我知道呢個 regulation 咧，其實咧政府咧當
as we know that there is this amendment by adding that the Secretary may, when it comes to application, revocation, and how to make an application, formulate subsidiary legislation. I just wonder whether it is appealable. For appealable issues, they have been clear provisions have been set out to decide that. For 34, when it comes to cancellation, the director has no choice. If the director is satisfied that the registered supplier is no longer a supplier, then the director must cancel the registration. And I have two questions to ask. First, I don't see that in the blue bill the registered supplier has the duty to tell the director that he is no longer a supplier, and thus and as a result the director has to cancel the registration. Correct. So now is duty bound instead of empowering. If the director is satisfied, yet the registration is not cancelled, will there be any legal consequence? You mean on the part of the director? Yes, because in the past the director may do it, because if he doesn't know, then he may not be able to do it, or he can just leave it for now. But now he must do it. So if he doesn't do it, what will happen? If it says must here, then we will follow the provision to deal with the cases. I don't know that much, not as much as you do about the choice of words. Well, I don't see any demerit in using the word may over must. Well, there is no disadvantage. It's just that now a legal duty is added, and usually there is a consequential amendment to state that what would happen if it's not done. So I just want to know whether they deliberately want to leave it blank. Or is it the case that they don't know what will happen yet, so they leave it for now? So for 33 and 34 is the registration and the cancellation. I don't really understand why there is this change. We have encountered similar situation when dealing with other provisions. That is, if it reads may, we don't know how wide the discretion of the director is. And if we can specify that after considering A and B, then the director will deal with it without having to consider other factors, we would think that it will provide certainty and clarity to applicants. And that's the experience we have from dealing with other provisions. We think this is better. Mr. Mo? From the point of drafting, what do you think? Whether it is an empowering provision or a duty provision is a policy decision, and if it's a duty bound provision, well, the legal advisor asked what would happen if it's not done. If it's not done, then it will be dealt with by way of, say, when a public officer fails to perform its duty. Perhaps it is subject to judicial review. Well, by changing it, will it give rise to more disputes? And it seems that using the word may suffices. I'm no legal expert, but I don't know whether there is any special consideration on the part of the Environment Bureau. For 33 and 34, we have already set down the factors to be considered. We propose to change the word to must to indicate that we have a very narrow discretion. No other factors will be considered. This is to avoid people thinking that there are other factors to be considered by the director. And we see that in some circumstance there may be a dispute. So we make use of this opportunity to introduce this change to reflect our intent. Mr. Andrew Lang, the legal advisor is correct. Well, there is not for the law doesn't say that the director has to cancel it, so there's no harm in leaving their name on the register. Well, if a company closes down and the name still appears in the register, then we won't be able to do anything about it. We won't be able to cancel records. And that happened a lot. So if factors have been taken into consideration, say for example that returns have not been submitted over a long time and we can't contact them, then we have the power to cancel the registration. And it's a common practice. It is practiced in other systems as well. Well, if you use the word may, then you may do it, but if you use the word must, then you have to do it. And that's the point. So it's a matter of degree. You don't have a strong view. If the EPD insists on their view, if they want to tie their hands, we have no reasons to object to it. Next, that is also to simplify it. It's related to section 37. We have crossed out a line here in section 35. It says that well, for registered supplier, whether it is done directly to the consumer or when it's done through an intermediary, then the supplier still has the duty to provide a recycling label. For some equipment, it is done through a dealer or distributor, whereas for some others it's done by direct sale. And if it's done by direct sale, then 35(1) does not apply because it's directly sold to a consumer. By deleting the sentence, we will be able to cater for both scenarios, and there is a consequential there is also a related and similar simplification in section 37. Next is section 35(4). In our discussion, we mentioned that for some developers, they would sell the flat together with a whole set of electrical appliances. The provision may be seen as distribution, but they are not in this trade, so we don't want to catch them. So for 35(4), we have excluded them. But after considering it, we think that it will also apply to other registered suppliers or distributor. As a result, we add bracket 1. So if it's for a developer to supply the electrical equipment is not seen, it does not constitute distributing. But what about use? If we adopt your revised version, that is, it's not just distribute, it's also use as well, then I think they will change the situation. Yes, you have heard our view. You will look into it and follow it up when it comes to the word use. And it seems that under section 35, if you use the word use, this is affected as well, because you have excluded the word use. You have excluded use here. So, well, it says here that if it is for in the course of business, it give the equipment to another person as a price. No, but I don't see the words use here. Well, I mean that you deliberately not use the word use, but you may be challenged.
Exactly the same scenario, but why have you not included the word use? Well, if the property is being sold together with the equipment, we're not talking about the displaying of these equipments. No, you say irrespective of whether or not it's for a business purpose or giving it as a gift and so on. So you are giving it away as a gift. I'm not proposing that you add the word use here. But I think the fact that you added the word use earlier on in the previous section has caused a lot of confusion. So I think if you link this up with section 35, after the amendment and after using the word use in 32, why have you not included use in 35? Okay, let's move on. Chairman. 36 bracket 6, definition of tenant. We have moved that to clause 31, but the contents are the same. 36 3b, you'll find the word fee is amended to become levy. So I will not elaborate any further on that one. Next, the next major amendment is 37(1)(a), which involves the word use. We have promised to go back and consider this further. For B, we are merging 1 and 2, whether it's directly distributing to the consumer or to other persons. For onward distribution in Hong Kong, I think it's covered by distributing the equipment to someone, to a person. Members have noticed that in the original 37(1)(b)(1), the text does not include distribution in Hong Kong, whereas in 2 for further distribution in Hong Kong, and that's why you ask whether we should, amend the drafting, and that's why we've taken out export from the definition of distribution, and hence we have streamlined section 37. Section 37 in the English version. (37)(1)(b) in Chinese, you have amended distributing the equipment to a consumer, and the word consumer is amended to person. Why not, retain the original word? distributing the equipment to a consumer. I don't understand why you need to change that. I think the person seems to have to be brought in scope. But there are two ways to distribute the product: either selling it directly to consumers, or the distributor distributing them to the dealer distributing them to the distributor and then a retailer. And that's why originally there were two ways of dealing with the equipment. In the event of direct sale to the consumer, and since this is a Hong Kong legislation and consumers refer to consumers in Hong Kong, we therefore have not said for distribution in Hong Kong. For subsection 2, we're talking about eventually equipment being distributed outside of Hong Kong. And that's why we've taken out the word export and put in for onward distribution. And because of that, members are concerned that when the public or when the professional read this section, they may, since in one we say in Hong Kong, in the other one we have not included in Hong Kong, there might be confusion. And therefore, we've taken out export from the definition of distribution. So distribution, therefore, does not include the export of these, regulated equipment out of Hong Kong. So therefore, after you have distributed electrical equipment, you'll be caught by 37. So the amendment will now streamlined the section. So the person refers to someone in Hong Kong. I don't know where you can show that the word person refers only to a person in Hong Kong. Well, this is a piece of Hong Kong legislation. Unless otherwise stipulated, person should be construed to be a Hong Kong person. So if we retain the original B2, where you have the word in Hong Kong, people will think that in one would include including what is not in Hong Kong. That is, the amendment that members would like us suggested that we make. Legal advisor, do you think this amendment can now allay our concern regarding confusion over consumers who are not in Hong Kong? I think members would notice that in B1 and B2, they've not done away with the word in Hong Kong, but rather something which only originally applies to consumers, they've changed it to any person. The word consumer in the Blue Bill is defined. There is a definition of consumer. It means someone who have access to regulated electrical equipment whose objective is not to distribute that equipment. So that has been amended. But even in the original text, the definition of consumer does not have a geographical connotation. So perhaps the government can explain further why you've taken out the word consumer and changed it to just a person, and why you believe that can resolve the question of whether or not it is in Hong Kong. I think we're talking about the person who has distributed the electrical equipment is not only just a consumer, but anyone whom the distributor gives the equipment to. Mr. Lai, I don't quite accept that since this is a Hong Kong legislation, the person must refer to someone in Hong Kong. If it is your intention that someone who reads this particular section will have any confusion regarding B1 and 2, and that the consumer you refer to includes people outside of Hong Kong. I think if you use the term the person, it is even more confusing. Chairman, let me try to explain further and see whether the DFJ can also supplement. The legal advisor asked how we can deal with the question of whether the person is in Hong Kong or not. In 31, we've defined distribution. It doesn't include the exporting the electric equipment in the course of the business, and therefore does not include selling the equipment outside of Hong Kong. As for whether we should use the term consumer or a person, we have to understand what Section 37 is intended for. 37 explains which are the equipments which will be subject to the levy. We propose that if the electric equipment, according to the trade, if these equipments are still in the warehouse, they're not yet sold, of course we will not charge the levy. But if they have been sold, then we will charge a levy. So in the original tax, there are two scenarios. You either sell them directly to consumers, or you don't sell them to a consumer, but you sell it to someone who would sell it onward in Hong Kong. When we discussed the definition of distribution, we've addressed the question of export. So we therefore think 37B can be further simplified. That is, selling the product does not include export. Then already in this case, the levy will need to be paid. Mr. Lai, regarding distribution, I think the amendment you are proposing today is confusing things further. If you look at 32(1), you have deleted, further distribution in Hong Kong, for further distribution in Hong Kong. I don't think you have specified elsewhere that the distribution is only for Hong Kong. So it's in 31 under the interpretation. 31, Part 4, interpretation of Part 4. Where under Section 31? The first one. Oh, you're not directly referring to Hong Kong. You're talking about exporting the electrical equipment. If we indirectly say that the person refers to someone who is a Hong Kong resident, I think that is rather confusing. Chairman, I think, Mr. Lai, I don't think your amendment has actually made the definition or interpretation clearer. Originally, under 32(1), you refer to distribution in Hong Kong, that's very clear. You've deleted that. But under 37(1)(b)(1) and 2, you're talking about two levels of distribution. One, you distribute directly to consumers, and secondly, you distributed someone for onward distribution to consumers. So I don't think your present amendment is better than the original version. Why don't you further clarify the original text? Because what you are now proposing to amend is even more vague. I don't know what the legal advisor thinks. Just looking at these few sections and looking at them together, I think things are more confusing now than they were. Perhaps in respect of 37(b)(1) and 2, I will, tell members about my own understanding. It would appear that under B2, you have deleted for further distribution in Hong Kong to a consumer. So whether it's consumer or someone who's not a consumer, everybody will be caught. Is that what you mean? And that is why in subsection 2, you've deleted subsection 2, and you put it under Roman 1. And you think that using the term person to replace the term consumer, you can deal with the situation where the equipment is not directly distributed to the consumer. There could be an intermediary who would sell them to the final user, who is the consumer, and hence you have this situation. That is the intention of the original amendment.
I think we all now understand where you come from. The problem is, if we read it this way, consumer is properly defined in the Blue Bill. Members are concerned that if you change consumer to a person, then you will be able to resolve the problem without seemingly expanding the scope. In short, Mr. Lai, I do think that you will have to think about it. Yes, the original 1 and 2 may be quite verbose. Perhaps you should work on the wording. I do think that the way you've changed it will cause a bigger controversy. We will consider it. We have spent quite some time before the summer recess on drafting. We understand what you mean, Chairman, and we'll see if there is any room for improvement. Because you have spent quite a lot of effort to design consumer, and by defining it, then the scope of the bill has been properly defined. And now you propose another change, and it muddied the issue. Well, I think the main point is distribution. If you distribute it, then you will have to pay the levy. But we will consider what you say. Continue, please. 37 bracket 2. It has to be read together with 36 bracket 3. 36 bracket 3 says if a person pays, makes a payment to the director, then a recycling label can be obtained. Originally, 37 bracket 2 says that the recycling fee is payable only once. There are views saying that, well, does it mean that for the same item there can be 2 payments? So we add under this section. So under 37, there will only be 1 payment charged. Yes. Next is 38, 5 and 5A. The original 5 deals with 2 offences. Well, on the first conviction is a fine at level 6. On the subsequent conviction is a fine of 200,000. We're talking about 2 offences. So we think it is better to separate them, so that it will be easier to decide what constitute a subsequent conviction. Okay, we have no views on this. Continue. Section 40, there are a number of amendments. It's also the addition of use. What is slightly different from the use we have previously mentioned, but it has to be read together with 32. For Section 40 bracket 11. Sorry, legal advisor. Under section 40 bracket 2 is specified that for the purposes of subsection 1, entering into an agreement to distribute does not constitute distribution. However, under 1, an additional concept is added, which is or uses. Under the revised definition, and it includes a display the said equipment for business purpose. And in relation to the agreement, if it is for this purpose, does it constitute use? Let's look at the definition of use. We will consider it together with the definition of use. And then next, this bracket 11, there is the change of an or. We think there is a need to introduce this change. Please continue. Next is section 41, bracket 5A. It says that in relation to developers or a renovation company, if they offer regulated electrical equipment together with the property, then it does not constitute distributing. And this is in relation to a removal of the old equipment. And we have excluded this duty. For developers who provide electrical equipment with the property, then since it doesn't constitute distributing the equipment, so they do not have to arrange for removal service under section 41. And under section 42(9), there is also the arrangement of removal service or provision of this service, and also provision of details. All these does not apply to a developer. And then 6A. Legal advisor, please. I would like to get some clarification from the government for section 41, and it just says that a seller must not distribute. And so you deliberately do this way, that it does not add the word use here? Yes. For 42(6) and 6A, then as I've said that there are two offenses, so we have separated the two. Next is section 44. We are now looking into the subsidiary legislation. So we would like to make the empowerment more clear. So it's in relation to the determination of the application and AB, cancellation or registration. We hope that there will be there will be clarity, and this is to avoid controversy. For subsection 3 is to change from recycling fee to recycling levy. It's a consequential amendment. Since it's a change to levy, there is no need to have subsection 3. Yes, then it's a Schedule 6. There is no change in the Chinese version, but in the English one, under television, there is a technical amendment. We've updated the certain terms. Where? Under item 4, under column 3, A, modulator is changed to tuner, bracket, or a receiver. We've talked to the EMSD. We think this is a more appropriate term. Yes, it's a technical term, yes. There's no need to change the Chinese version. Okay, it says tuner or receiver. Yes. And these are the relevant amendments under the Promotion of Recycling and Proper Disposal, Electrical Equipment and Electronic Equipment Amendment Bill 2015. And, well, when it comes to the disposal ordinance, the waste disposal ordinance, we have mentioned about certain improvements in the flow of the Chinese version. This is section 14 of Waste Disposal Ordinance. It's the 20 capital A. Under 20 capital A, we propose to add paragraph C that electrical waste does not fall within the description of paragraphs A or B. So this addresses the issue as to whether someone will think that it has expanded the scope of regulation. Previously, it says any e-waste, and by adding this provision, it will take away the misunderstanding. Under 20B, there is also similar amendments. One is for import, one is for export. For 20 capital G, in the last meeting, we've mentioned that about this. This is about defense. Under 20G, there are two defenses. As a result, under for the defense, under subsection 6, we have added under subsection 5. And that's all for the CSAs. Any other views from the legal advisor? I ask them to follow up on the issues I have identified. Well, when it comes to the word use, members have strong views. It seems that we will need another meeting. We will have to make an assessment. There may be some other corresponding amendments to other provisions as a result. Let's say we will have another meeting. We have to keep in mind the time we have. We have not yet finished the scrutiny, and we will have one more meeting. It will be difficult for us to set a date now. We have to check the date. We don't have a date set for that yet. Well, let's see how much time you need. Any other business? We'll have to work out the date of the next meeting. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.